I remember that day, May 11th, 2017. The trailer for Journey Beyond Sodor was released, and from then on until August 8th, the fandom was right on the edge. The hype for this special was intense, but not in a good way. As time went on and more sneak peeks came out, we began to ask ourselves, could this be the beginning of another downfall for Thomas? Was another dark age looming ahead? After 4 fantastic seasons that brought the show out of its first dark age, would it go down again? In fact, some were asking, would this be the beginning of the end of the show? Or worse, the fandom? Well, it's out now, and all I can say is, it's good. Yeah, it's not the best, but definitely not the worst. It's loads better than The Great Race, I'll tell you that. The negative hype for this special was completely blown out of proportion. Yeah, the special does have a few flaws, but in the end, all this hate was over something that was quite decent. In fact, I feel calling it decent's a real insult, but let's take a look. This is my review of Journey Beyond Sodor. Oh, and spoiler warning. I'll start off by saying one great aspect of the special is that I had no idea what the story was going to be. From the trailers and posters, all I knew was that Thomas would go to the mainland, come across these strange engines, and then James would be chased around some smelter's yard. Even while watching the special, I could not tell where it was going. It was like that until about 3/4 of the way through. The story itself is actually pretty good. There's a few issues, but I was pleasantly surprised by how invested I was. It starts out pretty cliche. James bragging that he's the best is nothing new, and neither is Thomas complaining about boring jobs. It's when Thomas takes James's train it really picks up. Well, that is until we reach what I think is the worst part of the special. Beresford. I'll talk about him later in the character section, but by God, if you thought The Great Race had pointless filler, the scenes with Beresford are like a solid concrete wall. Fortunately though, unlike The Great Race, that's really the only point of pointless filler, and it gets moving again. It's a lot more structured than The Great Race. It knows where to keep its focus on, Thomas and James. Both of them feel like very appropriate characters for the special. But even though the first act is a bit slow, they kinda make up for it with various little gags. Henry's slow-mo crash at the beginning is hilarious, and James's song is very fun, not to mention the people dancing in the station. That was pure gold. The movie gets really interesting when Thomas first meets the experimental engines and then gets stuck in the smelters. Thomas is basically held hostage, and that's something we really haven't seen before. Now, of course, there are a lot of questions raised, like how can locomotives hold each other hostage if they are controlled by people? Was the manager of the steelworks a part of the plan? Was Thomas's driver put into forced labor? Holy crap! If you look deep into this, it's quite dark. Oh well, real-life trains wouldn't have faces either. By the way, someone should just go on the wiki, go to every single episode and special, go to the goofs section and just put in real life, trains would not have faces, just to troll the internet. That would be hilarious. But anyway, the story was actually very gripping, and we see lots of character development. The scene where Thomas escapes the smelters is so entertaining. The suspense is perfect. The ending chase scene, though very cartoony, was also an intense action-packed adventure. In the end, Hurricane runs into molten metal and basically starts melting. That's pretty intense. Never seen that before. Closest we got was like Stepney gets lost. Heck, even Thomas almost gets dropped into the pot. I will say, though, that the resolution feels very rushed, and that's a big issue I have. First of all, did you really have to make Frankie cry? That was pretty annoying. But also, should we really be forgiving Hurricane and Frankie that quickly? I eventually knew the experimental engines would probably find a job here, but at the same time, it just seems that everyone forgave each other very quickly. Thomas just goes from let's get out of here to oh no, let's help him in a very short time. I understand saving Hurricane because he was basically about to die, but I don't know, I think they should have dedicated more time to, further developing this ending rather than, spending it with a certain blue crane. Another rewrite or two could have done this some good. I'm still mixed over it, but overall, the story was very well done. I wasn't really impressed, though, with the overall moral. Yeah, it's one that I think we have used to death in the show. The Great Race may have been messy, but at least it had a nice moral about being yourself. Journey Beyond Sodor's message is that no one is the favorite, and friendship is more important. Haven't heard that before, have we? It would have been one thing if it was just subtle, but it's really hammered on the head here. It's just so cliche. We've seen James boast about being the favorite before. So yeah, the moral and the clunky ending I was not very impressed with. I was, though, impressed with the overall story. Not the best by any means, but Andrew Brenner seems to still have the right footing in place. You all know that the Great Race completely wasted the opportunity for new characters by just shoving most of them in the background. In Journey Beyond Sodor, however, every new character plays a significant role. Well, almost everyone. We are introduced to Lexi, Theo, Merlin, Hurricane, Frankie, and Burpfart. Beresford? I will say this. Never have I had such wrong predictions about characters. I was generally afraid that these characters would turn out to be extremely annoying. Well, one of them was exactly that, I'll let you guess. But the others, I was very impressed by how likable they were. Well, I guess you're not really supposed to like Frankie and Hurricane, but you get the idea. The experimental engines is where I was most concerned, but by God, these are the logging locos done right. Hell, Lexi is Marion done right. Before the special came out, it was said that Theo was supposed to be autistic and Lexi was, gender fluid. Well, if they were, they did a damn good job, as I didn't see many of those traits. My favorite character has to be Theo. He's just such a likable guy, and I really connect with him. It said he's supposed to have traits of autism, but to be honest, I found it more like Asperger's syndrome. He's shy and doesn't have much self-esteem, yet he's also quirky and very interesting. That is something I definitely relate to, having Asperger's myself. The voice is spot on and really defines this character. Like I said before, Lexi is what Marion should be like. Awkward, funny, but not annoying. I can't count how many times she cracked me up.
He's a stealth engine.
Stupid little hobbitses! They stole it from us, precious!
The first thing that comes to mind whenever looking at Lexi is this large cab-forward engine at the Sacramento Railroad Museum, a place that has many childhood memories for me. Though I gotta ask, why does she have a Scottish accent if she's an American build? Heck, does anyone else think she sounds exactly like the Master or Missy from Doctor Who? Maybe she really is American and is just faking that accent, like that hilarious French one.
Stealth engines are designed to be hard to see, out of sight.
It was said she was supposed to be gender fluid, and I didn't really see any of that. She seems pretty female to me. Heck, she has more ADHD than gender fluid. Maybe both she and Theo have autistic traits, but she's a great character nonetheless. Merlin is interesting because he didn't appear until more than halfway through the special. I don't get it. Maybe they were just trying to build up hype for him? I don't know. But Merlin is such a great character. He's voiced by Hugh Bonneville, who nails it. He looks amazing, and you just gotta love his personality. Think about it. Whenever the other experimental engines say they can't do something, he is still eager to try it.
No, we can't do anything, but we can try.
That's something I have a lot of respect for, folks. He may be completely oblivious of his surroundings, but he's no fool. I really do admire this guy. I was concerned he'd be some goofball who keeps getting into trouble like some certain alien rabbit, but like the others, I was completely wrong. As for Hurricane and Frankie, I was pleased with them too, especially Frankie. She's so cunning and devious, yet full of energy. I'll talk about the movement later, but I feel that Frankie is the only character who should be bouncing. That's what she is, bouncy. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think she's the first female villain in the show. If I did have any problems, it's, again, I really can't stand her crying. It's annoying. But that's a nitpick. Even though she's a villain, she's very likable too. Hurricane is great too. He isn't strongly as developed as a character like Frankie, but by God, he looks creepy, like an actual legit steam engine villain. Just look at that humongous face. Look at the eyebrows.
These are attack eyebrows. They're cross.
Hurricane's class reminds me of a bulldog. Very short and stubby, but fierce nonetheless. Both he and Frankie form a devious pair. So you've probably guessed who the worst character of the special is. Yes, Beresford. God, I hate this guy. The only thing he adds to the plot is when he hides Thomas from Frankie and Hurricane. Nothing else. He's just a very bumbling, yet actually creepy guy. Think about it. He tries to use force to get people to like him. That's very much like a predatory old guy on the street. Isn't that slightly alarming? I don't even want to think about what he'd be like as a human. He actually picks up Thomas with his crane. That's just not okay. But I do feel kind of sad because he could have actually been a funny guy. The idea of an eccentric Jamaican crane is hilarious. Here's how it should have been. Thomas runs into Beresford, and the crane maybe tells a few jokes, then gives him directions. Beresford then appears later on and somehow helps Thomas rescue James. But he doesn't even have to rescue James. He doesn't have to have a relevant role as long as he's just used as a small gag or a cameo. Think of it like that Cairo swordsman from Indiana Jones. He has no impact on the story or moves the plot along, but the scene where Indy just casually shoots him is pure gold. He's a device for a hilarious joke, nothing more. Beresford could just be some random goofball Thomas met for a minute or two, and maybe this creepy crane could be an example to Thomas as why he shouldn't be very trusting of the mainland engines. Something like that would make a funny joke that wouldn't interfere with the plot. But having a whole song dedicated to his social awkwardness is not funny nor interesting. It is too long. The only thing I laughed at is when Thomas told him that you can't force people to be friends with you. And I laughed so hard because that is so true in this society. I actually thought Beresford was going to be one of those merchandise-only characters at first, which I guess the special is allowed one of. But there is no merchandise of this character. He is completely pointless. But I guess considering all the other characters were amazing, I think it kinda makes up for that. Beresford's scenes are annoying, but they're not that long. Whilst I believe Beresford was pretty much the only reason the special was 10 minutes longer, the other characters are extremely likable, and I have never been so fond of a group of characters like that in a special. As far as returning characters, well, I have to talk about the Troublesome Trucks. They were awesome. They were all unique and funny. Their interactions with Thomas were on par with the original series, if not better. This is the first time we've seen Saltwagon since the, 7th season. The Trucks' responses to Thomas were priceless. I'm really pleased with how they utilized the Trucks here. The other characters appeared here and there, but they weren't shoehorned into the story. There's a really nice music video dream sequence that has pretty much everyone, well, except Duck. And with that, I'll move on to the songs. I'll be honest, I did not think the special was going to be a musical. I knew it would have songs, but I thought a full-blown musical was just a one-off they did with The Great Race. So I was pretty surprised to hear that they were doing it again. And I gotta say, the songs are not as good as The Great Race. They're not bad, in fact some of them are really enjoyable. It's just they didn't really stick with me like the ones in The Great Race did. All the songs in The Great Race were really well done in my opinion. Here we have one catchy song, one emotional song, and the others are either just good or meh. I'll talk about them in order. Somebody Has to Be the Favorite is a nice bouncy tune and pretty catchy. I love how James just barges right in front of Thomas, and again, the people dancing had me in stitches. Seriously, look at the guy juggling. It's just not as interesting as something like Will You Won't You or I'm Full of Surprises. The song is basically James boasting about stuff we've heard before, but I still liked it, and the visuals made it more enjoyable. I don't need to go into much detail about who's Thomas because I think you already know my thoughts. It's pointless and annoying. The only good thing about it was when the trucks were dancing, but only when they were on the rails. I'll get to that later. Then we have what I think is the best song hands down. The hottest place in town is the streamlining of the special. It is incredibly catchy and jazzy. Just like streamlining, it just grabs you and doesn't stop. The jazzy music hooked me immediately. Hell, whilst writing this review, I replayed Michael Melton's instrumental a countless number of times. Do I even need to go on about the visuals? I'll talk more about that in the animation section, but what else can I say other than it gets really hot? I think I still prefer streamlining over this, but the song is still a perfect way to introduce the two villains on the special, and a very hot tune. The next song, I Want to Go Home, is actually quite an emotional piece that I was not expecting at all. Yeah, the title is I Want to Go Home. Sounds interesting, right? Maybe it's the audience's reaction. But man, I don't know how they did it, but you get some legit feels when listening to it. You really see a lot of character development with Thomas here. He was yearning for so much more than his normal life, but realizes that the grass isn't always greener on the other side. He learns that not everything that seems perfect is actually perfect. The lyrics can be a little cheesy, but they all convey the tone very well. The instrumental is very touching. Chris Renshaw really outdid himself here, and I'll talk about him more later. This is the first time where we see almost every single Sudrian standard gauge engine of this era in one shot. Or everyone but Duck. I understand why they didn't put Diesel 10 in, because he's kind of a movie-only character and a hermit, and probably not someone you'd have fond memories about. But why the heck is Duck absent? I get that after shoehorning him into Season 18 they may want to tone down his appearances, but he's one of the main characters! Yeah, I don't agree with Duck fan service either, but you've got Glenn and Norman, yet you just couldn't put Duck in front of Connor? Oh well, I honestly think that was an error. The song itself is amazing, and I love how it ends, with Thomas trying to escape. The build-up is great, even though he ends up just crashing. You just got to admire Thomas's personality here. He's willing to do whatever it takes to get back home. The next song, We Can't Do Anything, has a very catchy chorus line, but it has a lot of pacing issues. It starts off really slow and doesn't pick up for a while. It's also a very, talky song, meaning that a lot of it is spoken rather than sung, and I'm not really a fan of that. But again, the hook is catchy, and it's interesting learning about these characters. I just wished it was a little faster and, more, developed. One more rewrite could probably get it right. We're also introduced to Merlin here, which is cool. And now, onto the final song. The most important thing is being friends, which I think is 100% decent. Yeah, average. Not bad, but not great either. It's your typical end of the movie music number. I'm not hating on it at all, I just think it's very generic. As I've said countless times in this review, we've heard the message before. It's one of the most generic morals about friendship. In fact, I think the whole show is based off that idea. It's called Thomas and Friends, if I recall. It's got a nice jazzy tune, and I can definitely nod my head to it. It's not a bad song at all. But we've heard songs like this before. Some of the visuals are pretty funny, like the Farmer Trotter dancing with his pigs. But did you really have to have the Fat Controller conducting the engines? I guess it works? I don't know, it's just strange. Like I said before, it's a decent song, and I guess it does end the special on a positive note. I feel like a lot of people like the song, and that's fine. I just think it's, decent. So overall, the songs didn't quite hit the level of the songs of The Great Race did. But let's be honest, The Great Race set the bar pretty high for songs. But I'm satisfied with what Renshaw wrote, and I've really enjoyed 2 of them. But the others, they're not bad at all. They're just fine for what they are. I have nothing really against them. We'll just have to see what Renshaw comes up for the next special. Alright, I'll now get into something that I think everyone is waiting for me to talk about. This was the first special animated by Jam-Filled Toronto rather than ARC. When footage was released of the special and we saw this new animation for the first time, everyone was pretty worried. What we saw looked not that different from something created by a first-time Trains user. But when Journey Beyond Sodor was actually released, we realized the only shitty animation is what we saw in the preview. Yeah, that's it. Just a scene of Thomas making his way through the mainland. For those of you who don't know, ARC Productions went bankrupt during the production of the special, and Jam-Filled Toronto bought the company. Because of the whole ordeal with ARC going bankrupt, a lot of time was lost in the animation. Therefore, in a final rush to get the film out, it's totally understandable why some scenes don't look that great. But what about the other animation? Well, yeah, it's frickin' amazing. Look at the first shot, for God's sake. Look at these landscapes! Look at these cliffs! Look at the damn intro! Oh my god! Okay, I'm getting too excited here, but you get the idea. The opening credits are visually by far the best of any Thomas special. I love the look of molten metal, and here it's no exception. I just want to drink it. Yeah, I know it'll incinerate my esophagus, but don't you just like to pretend it's an orange slushie? The Steelworks is a load of eye candy with lots of hot things going on. The place where the experimental engines live is beautiful too. It's not really established what it is, a waste dump, abandoned railway, but the forest is such a whimsical place and way more developed than some anarchist island of stupidness. Like I said before, the characters look great too, but I think I better get on to the big elephant in the room. I'm pretty sure you know exactly what I'm talking about. The movement of the engines. Holy crap! This created a massive firestorm within the fandom. I was in shock reading what people wrote on Twitter and YouTube. Some of them wrote things along the lines of, they would never forgive others who liked the bouncing. Wow! This was by no doubt the biggest fear people had about the special, and the future of Thomas, in fact. So, naturally, I should state my opinion on it. Alright, now is the time to grab popcorn. Here we go. What do I think of the bouncing engines? Well, it only works in the songs. I don't mind them swaying to the rhythm of the music. It's actually quite fun, and let's be honest, you probably sway around to the songs like that too. I'll be honest, I think I'm the only person who laughed when the trucks rocked from side to side in Who's Thomas. I thought it was hilarious. But what I don't find funny at all are the trucks being able to spontaneously separate from each other, move onto different tracks, and somehow twirl around in a circle. This sparked a mini meme on Twitter called Truck Vivo, where people would take the footage and replace the song with something like Michael Jackson, or You Spin Me Right Round, or Enterprising Engine 93 did ABBA. So yeah, the trucks twirling was just stupid. But that was it. That was the only time something stupid like that actually happened. After seeing the sneak peek, I was worried that engines would now be able to jump in the air or spin around on their own will. I'm glad that they didn't go that far, but the swaying and the movement should really be only in the songs. It is incredibly distracting to see them shake during dialogue. But for me, it's not really that big of an issue though, and if it becomes the norm, I think I'll just get used to it. It looks like they were just experimenting with something new, and I get that, but I just don't think it's one they should continue. But again, I think it's a really minor detail when looking at the big picture. We definitely should not have been going insane over it like we did. If you don't like it, fine. If you do like it, fine. I honestly couldn't care less. It would be great if they got rid of it, but if they don't, it's not a big deal. I'll probably get shot for this, but there's my opinion on that. Although, I will say, this part was very clever, even if it's a bit unrealistic. The rest of the animation, aside from a few locations, is stunning. The animation is still in good hands with Jam Filled. Remember back in January 2013 when everyone commented how shitty Ark's animation was in the early preview of King of the Railway? Well, that turned out fine, didn't it? And I can say the same about Jam Filled. I'll now talk about some other positives with the special. One thing that has to be talked about first is the music. Not the songs, but the soundtrack. I am so amazed at how epic the music was in certain places. It's phenomenal. Chris Renshaw has definitely got more footing in the soundtrack. Some of the music is almost on the level of Hummy Man's soundtrack from Magic Railroad. The instrumental of the songs are amazing too. As I said before, you just get the feels when you listen to I Wanna Go Home. I'm glad Chris Renshaw is on the right track, and I can't wait to see or hear what he has next for the show. One little thing that makes a huge difference, not only in this special, but the whole Brenner-Thomas era in general, are the little gags and humor. It's just spot on. You've got people dancing in the station, the porter trying to get the Fat Controller to give him that thing, Farmer Trotter dancing with his pigs, and by God, the Fat Controller's war room had me in stitches. I don't know why. It's just so funny how he controls his whole railway with a few cheap toys he shoves around on a map. Andrew Brenner does a great job of inserting humorous moments here and there, something that was completely absent in seasons 13 through 16. The trucks were hilarious too. I cracked up at the badge yard quote.
This doesn't look like a goods yard.
No, it looks like a bad yard.
Very bad yard.
I'm really glad they've developed them more. Of course, I know trucks aren't supposed to be extremely fleshed out characters, but the way they wrote them provided brilliant comedic interaction. I found it clever how they used the shunter diesels from the Great Race. I certainly wasn't expecting that. Of course, that was probably for budget reasons. Journey Beyond Sodor is a very innovative yet contained special. It seems the creators wanted to do something big but not ridiculous. Thomas getting enslaved at a steelworks is a very unique idea. It's definitely something that could have a lot of merchandise, but it also took time to develop the characters and tell a proper story. There wasn't really any bridge jump scene equivalent here. Aside from a few moments, like the scenes with Beresford, everything contributed one way or another, and I'm really glad, especially considering Mattel has more hands on the show now. As for any other negatives, well, there aren't that many. I do think the way some of the track layouts are designed on the mainland are really stupid, but that's only in one scene. I'm kinda surprised Sir Topham Hatt wasn't angry at Thomas for taking the train instead of James. That's kinda stealing, and what if he wasn't the right engine for the job? Like I said before, whilst the general idea of Thomas being enslaved at a steelworks is an interesting one, you do have to wonder several logistics with that. Whilst having the drivers do stuff again is great, it does create a bunch of plot holes and conflicts during moments that are a bit more unrealistic. We see Thomas's driver get out and switch the points, but never do we see him trying to get Thomas out of the steelworks. You could argue maybe he does, but it's never shown, or he's just too afraid to do anything, but then that just leads into Thomas's driver basically being a slave, which is pretty complicated for a kid's show. How do I explain this? In Thomas and the Magic Railroad and Misty Island Rescue, there were no crew visible, except for Burnett Stone. In that case, you can just assume that the engines control themselves. Same thing goes for the Great Discovery. There's no driver stopping Thomas from going into the mine. If there were actual crew members in the mentioned movies, it would just create a mass amount of questions like, is Diesel 10's driver evil? Are all drivers on Sodor just irresponsible? It's a very complex argument, and I think I'm going way too deep into it. It is a kid's show after all, but that did confuse me. So yeah, that is Journey Beyond Sodor. I've gone on for a while now, so I think I should bring this to a close. How did Journey Beyond Sodor turn out? Was it really worth getting all afraid over? Absolutely not. The worst things everyone is expecting were pretty much exactly as it was shown in the trailers. I thought Beresford was going to be a pointless character, and I was right. I was afraid after seeing the trucks dancing off the rails, but that was the only insane moment like that. The bouncing, though I dislike it, is a very minor problem in my opinion. You don't have to accept it or like it, but the fact that many people dreaded the special just because of this, it was just really out of proportion. Yes, I hate the bouncing too, but it's such a... Is it really that big of a deal? The special is pretty solid as a whole. The ending does feel a bit rushed, and I feel some screen time should have been used in other ways other than spending time with, well, him. I really do not like the message, and it was really hammered on the head. It's boring, and I don't know how many times I've had to say this, but we've seen it before. That was my major issue, but Journey Beyond Sodor is still an enjoyable watch. It's definitely not up with The Adventure Begins or Sodor's Legend of the Lost Treasure, but is a massive improvement over The Great Race. Out of all the specials, it's probably in the middle. Of course, when I say middle, I don't mean middle as in meh or average. I mean, if I were to rank every special, it would be right in the middle. Even Day of the Diesels and Misty Island Rescue weren't actually that bad if you think of it. They were just okay in my opinion. So was The Great Race. I would give Journey Beyond Sodor a B. I was considering giving it a B-, but it's actually done pretty well. I can safely say that Thomas seems to still be in safe hands for now, and hopefully Mattel won't change that. And that is my review of Journey Beyond Sodor. Thanks for watching. Because of the whole ordeal with